Think International, backstage at the church conference here in Las Vegas, Nevada, Jeff Moores, and I'm sitting here with two amazing leaders, pastors, wives, mothers, grandmother. Gini Smith, who's one of the founding pastors of the City Church up there in Seattle, Washington, and Wendy Perez, one of the founding pastors of the Church of South Las Vegas here in Las Vegas.
The following content is brought to you by the Church Conference, a Spirit Contemporary Pastors and Teams event in Las Vegas. Visit thechurchconference.com for more information.
We're talking about topics and trends right now, and something it's out there, but it's really kind of wildly ignored is pastors' wives. You were married for 38 years before
Correct.
Wendell graduated into heaven, huh?
Yes.
And just an amazing man, by the way. I've gained so much from his ministry.
He was.
And so you had a long period of time of being not only active as a pastor, but also a pastor's wife.
Correct.
And for the past 8 years here at the church. So, I mean, I feel like I've got two of the world's experts on the topic here of pastors' wives. But curious, why do you guys think it's kind of an ignored subject?
I would say, I think the diversity of the demographic you're looking at. Because pastors' wives can range from the stay-at-home mom to the teacher to the professional to the co-pastor even.
Right.
And so the wide range, I don't know if people feel intimidated to broach the subject. They feel intimidated to begin to minister or try to reach out. Because I know that I myself have gone to events trying to reach out, trying to build relationships, get input. And I'll be sitting at a table with two stay-at-home moms and a lady who is the co-pastor with her husband. And I'm going, well, I'm somewhere in between there. And so, how do I glean a little bit from them?
Yeah.
But it's not exactly who I am. So I think sometimes we have a hard time maybe finding somebody that is exactly the way we do it, although I'm sure that's kind of impossible.
It is an undefined role. And I think that's part of the problem. There's no manual on how to be a pastor's wife. Sure. And in different churches and different denominations, the role varies. As Wendy already mentioned, it can vary from complete non-involvement to being very involved. And again, depending on the couple, the situation, the denomination, the style of church, whether or not they even receive women in ministry, contributes whether the individual, the pastor's wife, is struggling with her role or, is very satisfied and fulfilled. In my case, from day one, my husband wanted and expected my involvement, what pushed me past some of my own insecurities. But as a result, I developed along with him in our roles and our function, and so we were all co-pastors together. We worked together in the ministry, and so with our family, it was never my husband was in the ministry. It was always our whole family was in the ministry.
Yeah.
And so as a result, it contributed to a lot of fulfillment on my behalf. I have always loved the ministry, and that there's never been a problem or an issue with the people. It's always been a situation of my fulfillment, the joy of my life, and so
besides me, of course.
So I can hardly relate to maybe the other end of it, where a woman would be isolated and alone, and her husband's gone, and the people don't have the same respect for her as they might have for the husband, and so there's a lot of conflict and insecurity that can result from that.
And I know you've both ministered to pastors' wives.
Correct.
A lot. Yeah. What would you say are some of the main issues that maybe a congregation should know? Or
that's a very good question. It's a very good question. And the congregation has, I believe, a significant role to play in encouraging both the husband and the wife in the ministry. If the congregation is loving and trust that the pastor and his wife have their best interest in mind and are encouraging, blessing, they really are going to receive the best from that man and woman.
Right.
But at any time that the congregation becomes critical, negative, judgmental, and that would be the case in any function of ministry in the church. At any point, if the congregation gets negative, it really does hurt the ability of both the man and woman to minister successfully. And interesting, we're talking about pastors' wives, but there is another scenario. There is the spouse of the pastor. There are situations where the woman is a senior pastor and her husband is supporting her, and the same situation could arise. It's probably more prevalent that it's a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
But that is the case, especially more and more in this day and age. You see more and more women stepping up.
You do. Strongholds in ministry.
Filling that lead role.
Yeah.
So,
I think just the congregation allowing her to be very real and just to be herself, whatever that might be. I learned from a great example from my parents, obviously. Just allowing each woman to develop her gifting. And sometimes if you're a strong lady, you think, everyone needs to be like me because this is so great. Everyone needs to be a team just like us because look how good this works. And I think a little bit of the maturing process begins to kick in, and you realize that that there's a variety of gifts. And so another pastor's wife, even staff pastor's wife, we're not just talking about lead pastors here. She needs to just be allowed to develop. You might have an age difference. She has lots of young children. It's a season of life. It's very seasonal. And just allowing her that expression. And I have found, following my mom's example, as we allow our staff ladies and the pastor's wives to have that freedom to choose their expression in the church. That it's far more successful than saying, you know what, don't be involved, don't come to any special meetings with your husband. But we invite them, they're welcome, we want you to be here, but there's no pressure. And
that's phenomenal.
Traditionally, when I was in college many moons ago, it was thought that a pastor's wife had to sing and play the piano. And that was the criteria for being a pastor's wife. And I really failed in both of those areas. So that was, I didn't qualify according to that criteria. But what we realized is the pastor's wife, as Wendy already mentioned, she has varying gifts, talents, graces, anointings. And I think the congregation could be patient in allowing her to develop at her rate of development, and also letting her express herself in her unique way. And I think that, again, that's true of any member of the congregation. We all want to be patient in allowing them to develop, allowing them to, allow the gifts and callings of God to be matured in them. And they'll grow in that process, and as a result, find fulfillment in that role. But it's when we get people in a box and say, this is what you have to do, this is, what you'll wear, and this is where you'll go, that I think that creates insecurity for anyone.
I can remember being a young girl and jean skirts came in. And jeans were still a little iffy in the church that we grew up in. And my mom went and got me a jean skirt, We didn't have a whole lot of money. Of course, that was the day. Pastors had to be very poor. And we didn't have a whole lot of money. So I'm sure it was a great sacrifice to go get me this jean skirt that I wanted. I wore it to church. And I remember one of my friend's moms went up to her and was very upset that I had the jean skirt on at church. Meanwhile, her own daughter had a jean skirt on. But I was at a different standard.
Because you're a pastor's daughter.
Exactly. And right at that moment, my mom just stepped in and she says, nope, she's going to wear her jean skirt. And I just realized, you know what? We all just need to be appreciated for who we are and allowed to be very human, and we realize that, listen, I'm going to put on a happy face. I'm not going to come to church wearing my emotion on my sleeve. I'm going to come to encourage. I realize what I signed up for. I know what God called me to be. But at the same time, there's those moments where you're just very, very human and you just want to wear your jean skirt. And that just has to be okay sometimes. To just be like everybody else. And get ministered to, have a good cry, laugh a lot, goof off with a friend, and just be you. And I think that more congregations, more staff allowing wives, anyone in a support position, to just be them and to be very real. I think they will find, like we said before, a more fulfilled woman and they will they'll be happier in the end, because
Yeah,
they're going to have a happy woman, they're going to have a happy pastor,
For sure.
and they're going to have a great congregation.
Yeah.
That's one thing that a husband, a pastor can do for his wife, is include her. If she's not included in the process of development of the vision, the call of God on their lives, involved in the prayer process of coming to conclusions and decisions and plans and strategy, she's never going to feel a part. And that doesn't mean she needs to attend all the meetings. It doesn't mean
really
that she
good.
has to be at the office every day, because again, her lifestyle might be different. Her, role, her gift might be different than being on staff and being in that position. But just the fact that he wants to hear from her, that he cares about what she thinks, is very important, especially to a younger wife, to know that he respects her wisdom and opinion. I think it's this one of the smartest thing a man can do is ask his wife's opinion, because a woman has an intuitive ability sometimes to sense that things are not quite right, or the direction they're headed is not quite right. She doesn't always have the ability to explain why she feels what she feels, but oftentimes it's the Holy Spirit in her, saying, hold on, wait, be cautious. And it's a wise man who listens to his wife and then tells people that he does. Because again, it's going to encourage the congregation. If he respects his wife, the congregation is going to respect her.
Yeah.
But if he's just respectful towards his wife, the congregation is not going to respect her.
Now, what would you say to a couple about to enter into this ministry life? What are some cautions you would give them? What are some encouragements that you would give them? They're about to take over a pastoral role. Obviously, like what you just said, hey man, listen to your wife within this, include her within this, but is there anything else that you would?
I think there's so many things that that a young couple can do. And the first thing and foremost is they need to learn to pray together over issues, situations, circumstances. Because oftentimes if you try to solve in the flesh what can only be solved in the spirit, you're only going to create contention, discourse in your home. And so there needs to be a camaraderie, a working together, a teaming together, not instead of pulling against each other, you have to pull against the issues, the things that you're facing. And so learning to pray together, learning to be able to talk about the issues taking place in the church without putting on your boxing gloves, and again, getting on the same side of the problem, working through the issues. I think that one of the biggest dangers in any kind of subjective ministry, which leading a church can be somewhat subjective, is that you take time to pray through things, that you get good counsel and input from others, and that you not be impetuous in your decision making, and that will again save you a lot of heartache. And along with that is that teaming together in the sense of agreement. When before you step out, that you agree together that this is what the will of God is and this is the timing. And either one is hesitant, there should be a caution exercised. And usually in a marriage, you'll find one is a little bit more impetuous than the other. And so that's why, opposites attract. And so the intent, I think, on God's part is that we would balance each other. So there has to be an appreciation and a valuing of that instead of fighting with each other in that process.
Huge.
My answer is obviously very, very similar. And one thing that I learned from my childhood pastor and my mom's pastor as well, Pastor or Sister Edie Iverson, was not pitting the church against the pastor's family.
Yes.
That was not going to be an option. That it wasn't going to be like, oh, pastor's family, huddle together because the big bad church is infringing on all of my time and our children, and we're living in a glass box, and woe is me, and really a little bit of a victim kind of mentality. But really, my dad was always so good at this. We did it as a family. I mean, if you had asked me when I was 16 years old and we started City Church, I thought I was pretty much just as vital as my dad. Now, of course, looking back, I realized he carried maybe a little bit more. But I mean, I was right there. Like, I mean, I always say I started the ministry at 16 because that's the way I felt.
Right.
I wasn't on paid staff, but I mean, we were doing this as a family. We were doing life together. we were doing church together. And we strive to do that with our children as well. And maybe to a fault, I think our 11-year-old likes to adopt the name of Pastor BJ. So we've had to rein him in a little bit.
Nice.
Not quite yet, little guy.
Right.
But I strive to do that with my children.
Exactly.
That church is a family place.
Yeah.
We are doing life together when we come to church. This is not an extracurricular activity. This is what the Perez family does, and
That's
we
good.
do it all together.
Now, some would say, and I'd love for you to, both of you guys to hit this, because some would say that if I do that with my kids, it's going to create a resentment in them because they always have to be at church. They always have to do this church stuff, and they become a PK,
Again, I think that is an attitude that you project to your children. If it's like, oh, we have to go to church, everybody, this is what we do, whether we like it or not. Everybody get in the car.
Wow.
We have to go to church. Then their children are going to pick up that attitude. But if your attitude is, we get to go to church, what a
So
blessing.
good.
Church is fun.
Yeah.
You're going to engage with your friends. You're going to be ministering. Like Wendy's kids cry if they don't get to go
Yes.
That's so
to the
good.
early service with their father.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, they want to be in the car, ready to go at every service, involved. They don't want to miss anything, even conference. They're here
Right,
because
right.
they want to be here, not because they have to be here.
Right.
And that's the kind of attitude that you want to perpetuate in your child. It's not we have to, it's we get to.
Right.
And we make it exciting, we make it fun. And that, again, that's part of the pastor's responsibility, not just for his own children, but for the congregation children, that he creates a children's ministry that is so exciting
Yeah.
that the children can't wait to get to church, and as well as his own children. Our children, again, would cry if they didn't get to go to church. It was never, I want to stay home. However, at the same, on the same token, if our son, for instance, had a basketball tournament, which he did in the course of his growing up years, that was over a weekend, my husband would leave the pulpit
Wow.
and go to the basketball
would.
tournament and be with his son. And he would tell the whole congregation, I am not going to be here next Sunday because I'm going to be at the basketball tournament with my son.
So good.
And if your son
Yeah.
or daughter has an athletic event, you need to be there too.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be away from, the church for, because every weekend that would be a little hard to
Sure.
swallow. But, at the rare occasions, to choose to be with your son, again, is communicating priority.
Yeah.
Be with your daughters, communicating priority, that the church is not more important than you are.
Right.
Even though the church takes me away
Sure.
sometimes from the home,
Yeah.
it's not more important than you are.
Yeah, I think two things that are really important to me with my kids is, first of all, it's not a free-for-all just because they're the pastor's kids. No one can just come up and rebuke them or correct them, and they will see the mama bear come out in me. And it has happened. And it's a scary and frightful
I
thing.
imagine. I can imagine.
Well, there's not two standards.
There is not
Yeah.
two standards. My kids are allowed to be kids. Guess what?
Yeah.
They run in church. And
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
we started the church. I have the most distinct memory of someone going, "Stop running, kids." And I thought, there's no one in here. We're
Right.
doing worship practice. These kids are here hours before everyone else. They're going to be here later than everyone
Right,
else.
right.
Why can't they run in church?
Yeah.
It should be a fun place.
Yeah.
They should have memories. Do you remember we played hide and seek? Do you remember when we lost Benaiah? Do you remember, whatever?
Right.
It should be a fun and enjoyable place. And so I quickly dealt with that situation. And the second thing is, I always had really phenomenal pastors, children's pastors and youth pastors in my life. And I don't think I would have made it without them.
Yeah.
And I definitely am very clear with expectations, kindly, not
Yes.
Yeah.
not. We're away from the frightful part. We're
Sure.
to the kind and generous and loving
nice mama
part.
bear.
Yeah. And just really watching out for all of the pastors and staff children.
Yeah.
That they are being looked after, that they're
Yes.
being pastored, that they're being
Yes.
almost preferred,
Right.
loved,
Yeah.
coached, drawn out
Yeah.
if they're a little shy, allowed to lead if they really have
Right.
that propensity, whatever it might be, that they know that they are so special.
Yeah.
Because they are here week in and
It's
week
incredible.
out. So whatever I can do to make them understand how important they are, how special they are. Yes, you might be here week in and week out, but you get a few other perks too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to come back and have the snacks
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
green
yeah.
room. You get to come and meet Pastor Jensen and get him to pray for you. Whatever
That's
it
great.
is for that child that's important to them.
Yeah.
To just allow them some of those benefits, and they
That's
really
huge.
see church as a wonderful place
That's
to be.
awesome. And I've actually heard you teach on that one time in a breakout up at the City Church, where you actually put on a special Christmas thing for the pastor's
still do.
kids, and still do. Yeah,
And they each get a significant present.
that's awesome.
It's not low budget.
Wow.
And we make a whole morning of it. They go ice skating, and then we have a big breakfast
That's
for
so
them,
great.
and we give them all presents, and
Yeah.
we clap for them, and we tell them that they are special and
Yeah.
unique because
That's
of their
great.
parents working for the church. Now, by that, we're not saying that you don't have to abide by the same guidelines that
Sure,
Of course.
sure.
everybody else.
Right, right.
But you don't have a separate set of standards
Yeah,
either.
Right.
And so you're allowed to be a child. You're allowed to
That's
have, problems from time to time. You're allowed to struggle, and because of that, we don't, fire your mother and father because you're not perfect. And
Right.
I think that takes the pressure
really
off
good.
off the other ministers and their wives also, that they're not having this constant pressure that if my
Right.
child doesn't perform, that somehow I'm going to be
huge.
relieved of my position.
yeah.
And that again takes the pressure off all the children,
Right,
and
right.
for that matter, all the mothers
Wow.
are making sure that their children, are performing perfectly. But my son just sent out an Instagram, and it was a picture of his son asleep in the chair at church. After a service was over, and he sent it out. He said, the life of a pastor's child, sleeping under the pews or
Yeah.
sleeping, on the seats. And we didn't look at that as a negative. We
Right,
all
right. Oh,
we
yeah,
all looked
yeah.
at it as, wow, fond memory.
Yeah, exactly,
Fond
yeah.
memory. Grew up sleeping
Yeah.
under the pew at the church or falling asleep
Yeah.
during a service. Now he's
Yeah.
not 16; he's 4.
Right.
But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
but it was a positive in
Yeah.
our thinking that you had that privilege, that wonderful opportunity to be raised in such a great atmosphere.
Wow. Now, if you could just one sentence to a sentence of encouragement to a pastor's wife out there, just one sentence, what would that be?
Be who God's called you to be. Don't, this is not one sentence. You really need to take down the expectations within yourself. I think as women, we struggle more with our personal expectations of who we think we should be.
Very good.
And it's just a trap of the enemy to keep us looking at what we haven't done.
Yeah.
And I do it. I think there's not a woman in the world that doesn't do it. We get so caught up in personal expectations, looking at other ladies, I should be her, I should be them, I should be whatever,
Yeah.
instead of just being who God created us to
good.
be.
That's
If,
good.
if it's a stay-at-home mom, the best mom in the whole world. You know what? If it's no kids and just a wonderful wife, if it's a lawyer or a politician, whatever it might be,
Right.
just do it as unto the Lord.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Very good advice.
Thanks.
I think my run-on sentence would be, it's an impossible job except for the grace of God.
It's so good.
It's not going to work unless you humble yourself and ask for grace
That's good.
and wisdom in every season. And recognizing that women live in seasons. There's seasons of singleness, seasons of young married, seasons of young children, seasons of school-age children, and so we live in times and seasons, and so you have to make the best choices for that season of your life, and His grace is sufficient for whatever season you're in. I'm in a new season right now as a widow,
Yeah.
and His grace is still sufficient.
Amen.
Wow.
Ladies, thank you so much. It's been a phenomenal time.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Big thanks to the church, LV. We appreciate everything you're doing for the kingdom. Think International. Out.